All right, this is the problem dealing with the adjusting entry that you need to do when you're using the allowance method. This is the entry that is dated December 31st, where you need to increase bad debt expense and credit the allowance or fill the bucket of allowance at the end of the year based on the amount that you are forecasting to become bad debt expense. So in other words, it's the amount that you're forecasting from customers that you think are not going to pay you back. You already know that in order for us to come up with that amount, the estimate, the forecasted amount of bad debt, there are two methods. One is using a percentage method, which I already did a recording based on that method. And then this one, which is aging. Okay, so with the aging, this is the best method of estimating. And what you're going to do for this problem is pretty easy because they already gave you the amount. They tell you that they already did the aging, which is, again, when you do your homework, you're going to have plenty of chances to be able to practice on how you come up with a 36,000. But for this problem, the amount is given to you. So in other words, the accountant took the time to age all the receivables between current 0 to 30, 31 to 60, and so on. And once they came up with the amounts as how old or past due the account receivables are, and then multiply by different percentages, they came up with the 36,000. But with this method, aging, we're not going to increase the expense December 31st here 36,000 and credit the allowance 36,000. And the reason for that is because the account allowance for doubtful account has $8,000. So we don't need to increase bad debt expense 36 and credit allowance 36. One of the reasons why this aging method is better than the percentage is precisely because of that. With this method, we're going to say, okay, the accountant did the aging and he came up with 36. So what that is telling you is that we need the allowance account to have here $36,000, which is the ending balance. And then you're saying, okay, in order for the allowance to have $36,000 January 1st, I need to credit the allowance for how much? So 8,000 plus what gives you 36? And that will become the expense. All right, so 36, you're going to say, okay, $36,000 minus the $8,000 that the account has right now is obviously 28,000. So I'm going to debit, let me just do the expense first. I'm going to debit the expense, $28,000 January 1st, December 31st, and credit the allowance $28,000 December 31st. So now your ending balance, again, the 28 plus 8 will give you 36,000. So the amount of bad debt expense only needs to be 28,000 because the account has an $8,000 balance from before. Okay, so let's go ahead and respond to the questions, and then I'll go back and I will make one last comment. Determine the amount of the adjusting entry. Yes, the amount of bad debt expense will be 28. Okay, and the credit to allowance needs to be 28. The amount will be $28,000. Okay, the next one, determine the adjusted balance of the account receivable. Okay, so the account receivable is not going to change. So the account receivable has $890,000. That will be the ending balance. Okay, and then it says the allowance for doubtful account. Okay, the allowance for doubtful account had 8,000, but with the $28,000 adjusting entry, we increase the allowance to the $36,000 that this problem is telling us that we would like to have after we did the aging. So the allowance account has the $36,000 that we are forecasting to be bad debt, the amount that we're thinking that is not going to be collected next year. So the ending balance is 36,000. And again, the bad debt expense for the year is 28. Okay, the 28,000. And then the last question here is asking for what is the net realizable value. So again, the net realizable value is accounts receivable minus the ending balance of the allowance account. So if the ending balance of the allowance account is 36 and account receivable had an 890,000, simply take 890,000 minus the 36, that will give you 854,000. So the net realizable value, or the amount expected to be collected, is going to be $854,000. Let me check the work. Perfect. Okay. All right, so one more thing for the final exam and even for your quiz 3, you're going to have a lot of questions on the adjusting entry. So let me go ahead and say it one more time. When you have questions asking what is the amount of bad debt expense at the end of the year when the company is using the aging, like in this problem, and they tell you that the allowance account has $8,000 balance, you're going to simply say, okay, if we want $36,000, or we're forecasting $36,000 to become bad debt, but the account already has 8,000, we simply need to add, or the expense needs to be only for 28. Now, if this problem, when you read this problem, if it says that the allowance, if it says that the account allowance for doubtful account, instead of having a credit balance, if it says that it has a debit balance, instead of having the 8,000 here, if it has a debit balance, then in this problem, we will have to add the debit balance. So just for 1 second, let me go ahead and change this. Okay, I cannot change it, but let's just put here that the account has a debit balance and put here 10. Okay, so debit balance and 10. So let me get rid of this. Okay, okay, and let's put the 10,000 here like the question is saying. So pretending that the account has $10,000, that this problem says $10,000 on the debit side. Okay, end of year, and we did the aging like it says here, and that we came up with $36,000 forecasted amount for the year, then the entry bad debt expense needs to be 46,000, because if we need to plug in a number here, which is a number that when you reduce the number by 10,000, you end up with the $36,000 that they're telling you. So in this example, we will need to debit the expense $46,000. Okay, debit the expense 46 and credit the allowance 46, because this 46 minus the 10,000 will give you the $36,000 that they're telling you. So once again, just making sure, if they're telling you that we're using the aging and they tell you that the account has a debit, if this would say debit balance, okay, debit right here, and it says here instead of a, let's say 10, the amount of the expense needs to be a plug-in. We call in accounting a plug-in to make it where that number minus the 10,000 debit ends up with a $36,000 credit balance. Now, if you want to explain why, or be able to understand why we add, the debit balance, or why we deduct the credit balance like we did in the first example, you should understand that the allowance account is an account that at the end of every year we credit the account. Then when we start a new year and we identify customers that don't pay, we debit the account. So the allowance doubtful accounts, if you end up in this last example with $10,000 on this debit side, that should tell you that the amount of write-offs, the amounts of bad customers during the year was bigger than the adjusted, the amount that you thought a year ago. So again, this was the debit and credit last year, and you have all the write-offs. So if you have a $10,000 debit balance, that basically tells you that the estimate from a year ago was not enough. Then you had a bunch of write-offs. It resulted in $10,000 like shortage. Your bucket, instead of ending up with a remaining balance, it was below zero. So this year, when you're thinking that the amount for next, the next year bad debt expense is 36, you're saying, okay, yeah, it's 36 based on my aging, but I'm bringing the $10,000 shortage from last year, so I need to add an additional $10,000 to the expense. Okay. In the previous example, again, I don't mind going back. In the previous example, okay, they told you that the account. Let's just do the first example. Go back. They tell you credit balance of 8, so we're gonna plug in here 8,000. Okay, and then we're saying, okay, the account has $8,000, then the expense needs to be only how much? 28, right? So the expense had to be $28,000 and then credit this account 28,000. So to be able to explain it one more time, in this example, we're saying, okay, a year ago when we fill the bucket, when we debited the expense December 31st of last year and we credited or fill the bucket of allowance, the amount that we did or we used was more than enough to cover the write-offs. Remember that when you write off receivables with this method, you debit this account, credit account receivable. Another customer, you debit this account, credit account receivable. Another customer, you debit this account, credit account receivable. So if at the end of the year the account has a credit balance of 8, that basically tells you that this number was more than enough to cover all the write-offs. So this year, when you're saying, okay, I want $36,000 based on my aging analysis, you're going to say, okay, yeah, I want 36, but the account still has $8,000 left over. So I only need to debit the expense for 28. Again, yes, I realize that this might be kind of hard, but you need to practice. And again, I'm telling you that you will have questions on this left and right. Okay, so during class, please ask me if you have doubts. So try to do your homework. If you don't get the correct answer, maybe like take a picture of the problem or be ready to ask me during class time so we can practice. Thank you.